The Galactic Federation was a testament to the triumph of order. For nearly 20 millennia, its vast, intricate network of star systems had operated under principles of absolute logic, collective consensus, and hyper-optimized efficiency. Its foundational species, the crystalline Xylari, whose thoughts flowed in perfect, geometric patterns, the multi-limbed Xthar, whose every decision was a calculated probability, and the ethereal Lumina, whose consciousnesses merged into vast, harmonious psychic collectives, had sculpted a civilization of unparalleled stability. Every protocol, from interstellar trade routes to diplomatic treaties, from defense strategies to social welfare, was governed by algorithms so complex they bordered on prescience, designed to eliminate deviation, minimize error, and ensure the smooth, predictable functioning of the whole. Individuality, while not forbidden, was gently guided towards the optimal collective good. Emotion, while acknowledged, was understood as a variable to be managed, minimized, and ultimately superseded by rational thought. Humanity, or Terrans, had been admitted into this pristine cosmic apparatus a mere 4 centuries prior. Their entry had been contentious. Their history, rife with internal conflicts, irrational decisions, and a bewildering spectrum of emotional responses, seemed antithetical to Federation ideals. Their minds, as observed by Xylari neuroscanners, were a chaotic storm of conflicting impulses, nonlinear associations, and what Xthar psychologists termed unnecessary cognitive redundancies. Whereas Xylari mind processed information with the elegant precision of a supercomputer, a human mind was a tangled garden of logic, intuition, memory, and raw, unbridled feeling. Their neural pathways branched in unpredictable ways. Their decision-making processes often defied statistical modeling, and their capacity for both profound empathy and startling cruelty was a constant source of fascination and unease for their Federation peers. Ambassador Alara Vance, Earth's primary envoy to the Federation Council, often felt the weight of this perception. Her species was tolerated, even valued for their occasional bursts of creative problem-solving or their surprising tenacity in minor crises. Yet they were always the exception, the wild card, the species whose very existence seemed to challenge the Federation's core belief in the supremacy of pure, unadulterated logic. Their minds, unchained by the rigorous optimization that defined other species' cognitive evolution, were seen as both a curiosity and a potential liability. They were a necessary, if somewhat messy, addition to the galactic tapestry, a splash of vibrant, unpredictable color on an otherwise meticulously rendered canvas. The Federation, in its infinite wisdom, believed it could eventually guide humanity towards a more efficient and logical mode of being. They were, as history would soon prove, profoundly mistaken. The first signs of the crisis were subtle, almost imperceptible. A Xylari trade negotiator, renowned for its flawless logical processing, suddenly began repeating a single, nonsensical phrase in its crystalline language, its facets flickering erratically before it collapsed into catatonia. A Xthar fleet commander, in the midst of a critical strategic simulation, issued a series of contradictory orders, then froze, its multi-limbed body rigid, its compound eyes staring blankly into the void. A Lumina collective, a vast, interwoven tapestry of consciousness that governed an entire star system, abruptly fragmented, its individual components screaming in silent psychic agony before falling into a deep, unresponsive coma. Federation scientists initially attributed these incidents to localized neural pathogens, rare cosmic radiation, or perhaps a new, highly targeted weapon from a rogue faction. But as the incidents escalated, spreading across star systems with terrifying speed, a chilling pattern emerged. The affected individuals and collectives weren't suffering physical damage. Their minds were simply breaking. Their logical frameworks twisted into paradoxes, their emotional centers overloaded, their very sense of self dissolving into a cacophony of internal noise. The source was eventually traced to a previously uncharted nebula, designated the Veil of Whispers. It wasn't a weapon, nor a sentient entity in the traditional sense. It was a phenomenon, an immense, diffuse psychic field that pulsed with an insidious, resonant frequency. This frequency, it was discovered, acted as a kind of cognitive amplifier, exploiting the inherent structures of sentient thought. For the Xylari, it amplified their logical pathways until they became infinite, self-referential loops, trapping their minds in unbreakable paradoxes. For the Cthar, it exploited their probabilistic reasoning, forcing them to calculate every conceivable negative outcome simultaneously, leading to absolute paralysis or self-destructive panic. For the Lumina, it amplified their collective consciousness until the individual minds lost all boundaries, merging into a single, screaming, undifferentiated entity that could not sustain itself. The Veil of Whispers was a mental maelstrom, a cosmic echo chamber that turned a species' greatest cognitive strengths into its most profound weaknesses. The Federation's advanced mental defenses, designed to block or dissipate brute force psychic attacks, were useless. The Veil didn't attack. It integrated, then corrupted from within. Their highly optimized, streamlined minds, built for efficiency and logical consistency, were perfectly susceptible. There were no redundancies, no chaotic detours, no illogical escapes. Once caught in the Veil's resonance, a mind was inexorably drawn into its own self-destructive feedback loop. Panic, a rare and deeply unsettling emotion for the Federation, began to spread. Entire research stations went silent. Fleets drifted aimlessly, their crews catatonic. Diplomatic channels became choked with garbled, desperate pleas, then fell silent. The Federation, built on the bedrock of ordered thought, found its very foundation crumbling. Their vast computational networks, designed to analyze and predict, could only report escalating rates of cognitive collapse. Their most brilliant minds, attempting to comprehend the Veil, often became its next victims, their logic turning against them. The galactic consensus was dissolving into a cacophony of internal screams, and there was no logical solution. Amidst the escalating crisis, a peculiar anomaly began to emerge. While Xylari, Cthar, and Lumina populations across affected sectors succumbed to the Veil's insidious influence, reports from Terran colonies and vessels within the same zones were different. Humans were affected, yes, but not in the same way. There were instances of acute anxiety, paranoia, vivid hallucinations, and temporary catatonia. But then they recovered. Sometimes within hours, sometimes days, but they recovered. And crucially, they didn't fall into the irreversible, self-annihilating mental states seen in other species. Federation scientists, desperate for any shred of hope, immediately dispatched research teams to Terran-held space. They deployed their most advanced neuroscanners, their most sophisticated psychic probes, attempting to understand this baffling immunity. What they found was not a specific gene, nor a unique neural structure, but something far more abstract and unsettling to their ordered minds: chaos. Their minds are messy, reported a Xylari neuroanalyst to the Emergency Council, its crystalline form vibrating with barely contained frustration. They do not follow predictable logical pathways. Their emotional centers are constantly firing, often in contradiction to their rational thought. Their memories are not perfectly indexed, but are interwoven with subjective experience and feeling. It's like trying to map a storm. A Cthar psychologist added, "We observed instances where a human mind, when exposed to the Veil's resonance, would begin to generate a logical paradox, similar to what incapacitates a Xylari. But then the human would experience a sudden, intense emotional outburst, fear, anger, even humor, and this emotional noise would somehow disrupt the paradox, allowing their cognitive processes to reestablish a different, albeit less efficient, pathway. Their internal contradictions seemed to be their shield." Lumina Prime, the Xylari Elder, hummed. Their individual consciousnesses are so distinct. Even when attempting collective thought, they retain strong, independent cores of self. The Veil attempts to merge them, to amplify their collective until it collapses, but the human mind resists complete dissolution. It pulls back, asserts its individuality, even if it means temporary internal conflict. Ambassador Lara Vance, present at these briefings, felt a strange mix of vindication and apprehension. For centuries, humanity's messiness had been seen as a weakness, a sign of their primitive nature. Now it was their salvation. Our minds are not optimized for perfect logic, honored counselors, she stated, her voice quiet but firm. They are optimized for survival in a chaotic, unpredictable universe. We evolved to adapt, to find patterns in noise, to innovate when logic fails. Our emotions, our illogical leaps, our capacity for both profound empathy and sudden, irrational defiance, these are not bugs. They are features. They are the noise that the veil cannot filter, the unpredictability cannot process, the contradiction it cannot resolve. The Federation scientists, bound by their logical frameworks, struggled to comprehend. How could inefficiency be a strength? How could chaos be a defense? Their predictive models, when fed with human neural data, simply returned error, unknown variable. They could not replicate the human mind's resilience, nor could they engineer a similar chaos into their own species without risking complete cognitive breakdown. Humanity was an anomaly, an exception to every rule they knew, and for the first time, that exception was their only hope. The Federation Council chamber, usually a beacon of calm deliberation, now thrummed with desperation. Sector after sector was falling silent. Billions of sentient lives were lost not to violence, but to the insidious mental unmaking of the Veil of Whispers. The Xylari, their crystalline forms dull with despair, acknowledged their logical impasse. The Xthar, their multi-limbed bodies slumped, admitted their strategic failures. The Lumina, their collective consciousnesses fractured and diminished, could only echo the pervasive psychic silence. It was Lumina Prime who finally spoke, its voice a low, resonant hum that carried the weight of millennia. We have exhausted all logical avenues. Our optimized minds, our perfected systems, are vulnerable. The Terrans, they are not. Ambassador Vance, your species has proposed a solution. We are listening. Xylari Vance stepped forward, the eyes of the entire Federation fixed upon her. Honor counselors, the Terran Directorate believes the Veil of Whispers is not an attacker in the traditional sense, but a reactive cosmic phenomenon. It amplifies existing cognitive patterns until they collapse. Our immunity lies in our mental noise, our inherent unpredictability. To counter the Veil, we cannot fight it with logic or force. We must overwhelm it with the very chaos it cannot process. General Thrax, the Xthar military leader, shifted uneasily. Overwhelm it with chaos. Ambassador, our species are built on order. Introducing chaos into our minds would be catastrophic. Not into your minds, General, Xylari clarified. Into the Veil itself. We propose a mental resonance cascade, a synchronized, yet individually diverse, projection of human consciousness directly into the Veil. Imagine thousands of distinct, chaotic, emotional, illogical, and brilliantly creative minds, all focused on a single point, but each expressing that focus in a unique, unpredictable way. The Veil, which thrives on predictable patterns, will be unable to process such a deluge of nonlinear input. It will be like trying to cancel 1,000 different, randomly generated frequencies with a single, simple inverse wave. It will overload its capacity to amplify and invert. A Xylari scientist, its facets flickering rapidly, projected complex mathematical models. The energy requirements for such a projection would be immense, and the risk, if the Veil somehow adapts, if it learns to process this chaos, the resulting feedback loop could be even more devastating. The risk is undeniable, Xylari conceded. But what is the alternative? Continued collapse? We have calculated the energy requirements. We have developed a system of quantum-entangled neural amplifiers that can focus and project the collective human consciousness. And we have safeguards. If the Veil shows any sign of adapting, we will immediately sever the connection. Our resilience is in our adaptability, counselors. We're not just chaotic. We are controlled chaos. We can direct it. The debate was fierce. The very concept of relying on unquantifiable human consciousness was anathema to the Federation's core principles. Yet, the alternative was extinction. Lumina Prime, sensing the shift in the Council's mood, finally spoke. The data, however incomplete, suggest the Terran anomaly is real. Their minds endure where ours fail. If their hypothesis holds even a fraction of truth, It is our only path. We grant the Terran Directorate full authority and all necessary resources for the Mental Resonance Cascade Protocol. May the Unchained Mind be our salvation. The decision was made. The fate of the Galactic Federation rested on the most illogical, unpredictable species they had ever encountered. The scale of the operation was unprecedented. Humanity, granted full access to Federation resources, began constructing colossal neural amplification arrays on strategically chosen worlds near the Veil of Whispers. These weren't weapons platforms. They were immense, intricate structures designed to channel and project raw consciousness. But the true challenge lay not in the technology, but in the minds themselves. Thousands of humans, volunteers from every walk of life, began arriving at the primary staging world, a verdant planet named Xylos Prime, ironically a former Xylari research hub now repurposed for Terran-centric operations. Federation observers, including Commander Vlor of the Cthar military and Lumina Prime's chief apprentice, a young Xylari named Crystalline Shard, watched with a mixture of fascination and bewilderment. They expected rigorous training regimens, precise mental exercises, and strict adherence to protocols. What they witnessed was different. Humans engaged in what they called mind-mapping exercises, which involved individuals sharing their most vivid memories, their deepest fears, their most irrational joys, not through data streams, but through direct, empathetic connection. They practiced emotional synchronization, where groups would intentionally evoke and share intense emotional states, from profound sorrow to exhilarating triumph. They engaged in creative visualization, constructing elaborate, impossible mental landscapes, then deliberately shattering them and rebuilding them anew. They are not disciplining their minds, Crystalline Shard observed, its facets rippling with confusion. They are exercising their contradictions. Their logical pathways are being strengthened, not suppressed. Ilara Vance, overseeing the training, explained to Commander Vlor, "We are not trying to unify them into a single, predictable thought. That would make them vulnerable. We are enhancing their individual mental signatures, making each one distinct, robust, and capable of generating maximum cognitive noise. Imagine a choir where every singer is improvising a different, complex melody, yet somehow together, they create a chaotic harmony that is impenetrable." Commander Vlor, a pragmatic Cthar, found the concept deeply unsettling. Our military training emphasizes perfect synchronization, predictable responses. This is the antithesis of effective combat. And yet, your synchronized responses are precisely what the Veil exploits, Xylari countered. Its strength is in predicting and inverting patterns. Our strength will be in having no predictable pattern to invert. We are teaching them to embrace their mental fluidity, their capacity for rapid, unconstrained thought, to access parts of their minds that your species, in its pursuit of efficiency, has long since optimized away. The training was grueling, not physically, but mentally. Humans experienced profound emotional shifts, cognitive dissonance, and even temporary sensory overload as they pushed the boundaries of their own mental landscapes. They learned to navigate their internal chaos, to harness it, and to project it with controlled intent. They learned to think sideways, to approach problems from angles that defied linear logic, to embrace the absurd as a valid pathway to understanding. There were moments of profound cultural clash. A Xylari observer, attempting to analyze a human dream-sharing session, nearly suffered a cognitive breakdown, trying to logically categorize the nonlinear narratives and symbolic imagery. A Cthar liaison, attempting to apply tactical probability to a human intuition exercise, found its calculations spiraling into infinite improbabilities. Yet slowly, grudgingly, the Federation observers began to see results. Humans who had been exposed to the Veil's fringes and recovered now seemed even more resilient. Their minds, having been broken and rebuilt, were stronger, more adaptable, their internal noise amplified and refined. The Unchained Mind was not a state of uncontrolled madness, but a state of profound mental freedom, a capacity for cognitive acrobatics that other species could only dream of. The Federation's understanding of intelligence, once a narrow definition of logical processing, began to crack. revealing the vast, unexplored territories of the human psyche. With the human volunteers mentally prepared and the neural amplification arrays fully operational, the next phase began, locating the veil's true source. Federation probes, even the most advanced, could not penetrate the veil's core without succumbing to its influence. But humanity had a different approach. A small, heavily shielded Terran scout ship, piloted by a human crew specifically trained in mental resilience, was dispatched into the fringes of the veil. Their mission, not to gather data in the traditional sense, but to act as a living sensor array, their minds directly interfacing with the veil's resonance, attempting to pinpoint its origin through a process of mental triangulation. "It's like listening to a song," explained Captain Eris Thorne, the mission commander, to the Federation observers before departure. "The veil is a cosmic hum, and every species' mind is a different instrument playing a different note. We're going to listen for the root note, the fundamental frequency that's causing this entire symphony of chaos." The journey was harrowing. As the ship delved deeper, the mental pressure became immense. Crew members reported vivid, unsettling hallucinations, their deepest fears amplified, their most irrational thoughts given terrifying clarity. But unlike the Federation species, they didn't break. They acknowledged the fear, processed the irrationality, and then, using their Unchained Mind training, they deliberately shifted their mental focus, creating internal noise that the veil couldn't latch onto. They learned to ride the waves of mental distortion, to navigate the internal maelstrom. "It's beautiful," whispered Ensign Lena Petrova, a young human xenopsychologist, her eyes wide as she stared at the shimmering, chaotic patterns on her mental interface. "It's not malicious. It's just being. It's a cosmic resonance, a natural phenomenon that amplifies and inverts. Our minds are just incompatible with its natural state." Through weeks of painstaking, mentally exhausting work, the human crew triangulated the source. It wasn't an ancient weapon nor a rogue AI. It was a massive, naturally occurring quantum singularity resonator, a colossal, ancient cosmic structure, perhaps a remnant of a long-dead universe, that pulsed with a fundamental, reality-bending energy. This resonator, previously dormant, had been inadvertently activated by the collective psychic activity of the Federation's highly optimized minds as they expanded their influence. The very act of Federation thought, so ordered and predictable, had inadvertently tuned the resonator, turning it into the veil of whispers. The irony was not lost on the Federation Council when the Terran crew finally returned, exhausted but triumphant. Their pursuit of perfect order had inadvertently awakened a cosmic force that preyed on that very order. Their logical minds had become the perfect tuning fork for their own undoing. "The veil is not evil," Lara Vance reported to the Council. "It is a mirror. It reflects and amplifies. Our minds, with their inherent chaos, are simply too noisy for it to perfectly reflect. We are the static it cannot filter." The plan was now clear. The human-crewed neural amplification arrays would project a massive, synchronized yet diverse, mental resonance directly at the quantum singularity resonator. It would be a concentrated burst of unchained mind, a cacophony of unpredictable thought, emotion, and cognitive dissonance, designed to overwhelm the resonator's capacity to amplify and invert. It wouldn't destroy the veil. It would simply force it to detune, to revert to its dormant, unamplified state. The day of the mental resonance cascade arrived. Across the primary staging world, Xylos Prime, and several other strategically positioned planets, thousands of human volunteers gathered in the vast, humming neural amplification arrays. Federation observers, including Lumina Prime, General Thrax, and a nervous Commander Vlor, watched from secure observation bunkers, their species' survival hanging in the balance. Ambassador Lara Vance stood on the central platform of the main array, her face grim but resolute. "Remember your training," she broadcast to all human participants. "Embrace the chaos. Feel the emotion. Let your thoughts flow, unconstrained. This is not about unified thought. It is about unified diversity. Let your unique mind be a note in the symphony, a symphony of chaos." The arrays began to hum, a low thrumming that resonated deep within the bones. The bioluminescent crystals, harvested from deep space nebulae and integrated into the technology, pulsed with a kaleidoscope of colors, reflecting the raw mental energy being channeled. Then the humans began. It wasn't a single, focused psychic blast. It was a wave, torrent, a deluge of raw, unadulterated human consciousness. Each individual mind, trained to amplify its unique noise, projected its own intricate tapestry of thought and emotion. There was the burning anger of injustice, the soaring joy of creation, the crushing weight of sorrow, the quiet comfort of love. There were logical deductions spiraling into absurd conclusions, intuitive leaps defying all reason, memories intertwining with imagined futures, fears transforming into defiant courage. It was a million different frequencies, a million different wavelengths, all converging on a single point, the quantum singularity resonator. Federation sensors, designed to detect coherent energy signatures, struggled to process the input. The Xylari analysis programs crashed, unable to categorize the sheer volume of nonlinear data. The Xylari probabilistic models returned infinite variables. The Lumina psionic receptors, usually so sensitive, were overwhelmed by the sheer, beautiful, terrifying noise. It's beautiful," whispered Crystalline Shard, its facets shimmering with an emotion it couldn't name. "It's everything, all at once." General Thrax, witnessing the raw, unbridled mental force, felt a primal awe. This wasn't warfare as he knew it. This was something else entirely. It was a force that couldn't be quantified, couldn't be predicted, couldn't be fought with conventional means. It was the antithesis of everything his species stood for, and yet it was working. As the mental resonance cascade intensified, the veil of whispers, which had been a vast, shimmering expanse of insidious energy, began to convulse. It wasn't collapsing, it was struggling. The quantum singularity resonator, unable to process the overwhelming, contradictory input, began to flicker erratically. Its amplification field wavered, then destabilized. The resonance it projected became garbled, fragmented, unable to find a coherent pattern to amplify. The mental pressure on the humans was immense. Nosebleeds, temporary blindness, and even brief seizures occurred, but they pushed through, their unchained minds adapting, finding new pathways, generating even more noise in response to the pressure. They were not just projecting, they were living the chaos, becoming the very thing the veil could not comprehend. Finally, with a soundless, cosmic shudder that registered only on the most sensitive of Federation instruments, the veil of whispers detuned. The quantum singularity resonator, overwhelmed by the symphony of chaos, reverted to its dormant state. The insidious psychic field dissipated, its resonance fading into the background hum of the cosmos. The mental maelstrom was gone. Across the galaxy, the catatonic Xylari stirred, their crystalline forms slowly regaining their luster, their minds re-establishing their logical pathways, albeit with a new, subtle awareness of their own fragility. The Xthar froze no longer, their multi-limb bodies moving, their compound eyes blinking, their minds slowly untangling from a web of infinite probabilities. The Lumina collectives, though scarred, began to reform, their individual consciousnesses reasserting themselves, their psychic tapestry slowly reweaving. The Federation was saved, not by logic, not by force, but by the unchained, unpredictable, and utterly human mind. The aftermath was a period of profound introspection for the Galactic Federation. The crisis had not only threatened their existence, but had shattered their most fundamental beliefs about intelligence, consciousness, and power. Their perfectly ordered systems had failed. Their optimized minds had been their greatest vulnerability, and their salvation had come from the very species they had considered chaotic, inefficient, and somewhat primitive. The Xylari, who had once prided themselves on their flawless logic, found themselves grappling with the concept of beneficial contradiction. Their neuroscientists began to study the human brain with a new reverence, no longer attempting to optimize it, but to understand its inherent noise and its capacity for emergent properties. They discovered that true innovation often arose not from linear progression, but from the messy interplay of seemingly unrelated concepts, from the emotional moments that defied logical derivation. The Xylari began to incorporate divergent thinking exercises into their educational systems, encouraging their young to explore nonlinear thought, a concept that would have been unthinkable a cycle prior. General Thrax and the Cathar military underwent an even more radical transformation. Their doctrines of precise, predictable warfare had been rendered obsolete by a threat that couldn't be fought. Humanity had shown them that the most powerful weapon wasn't a destructive energy blast, but an unquantifiable mental force. The Cathar began to reevaluate their entire strategic philosophy, exploring concepts like asymmetric mental engagement, cognitive disruption, and adaptive resilience. They started training their strategists not just in fleet maneuvers, but in understanding the psychological vulnerabilities of an enemy, and more importantly, in fostering the unpredictable, adaptable thinking that could counter unforeseen threats. The idea of mental warfare was no longer a fringe concept, but a vital field of study. Perhaps most significantly, Federation diplomacy and social philosophy were irrevocably altered. The Lumina, having experienced the terrifying dissolution of their collective consciousness, now understood the profound importance of individual identity and mental boundaries. They began to explore ways to integrate individual noise into their collectives without compromising their unity, seeking a balance between harmony and distinctness. The Federation Council, once a bastion of rigid consensus, now actively sought out diverse perspectives, even those that seemed to defy logic. The Terran exception was no longer a curiosity, but a model. They began to understand that true strength lay not in eliminating variables, but in embracing them, not in perfect order, but in adaptable resilience. Ambassador Alara Vance, once a peripheral figure, became a central voice in the Federation Council. Her insights, once dismissed as eccentric, were now sought after. Humanity's place in the galaxy was cemented, not as a powerful military force, nor as an economic powerhouse, but as the Unchained Mind, the species that could navigate the chaos, that could find solutions where none logically existed, that could harness the very contradictions of existence. They were the ones who dared to be irrational when rationality failed, who embraced the unquantifiable when the quantifiable proved insufficient. The quantum Singularity Resonator remained, a contained anomaly on the edge of the galaxy, a constant reminder of the threat that had almost unmade them all. But it also served as a monument to the Unchained Mind, a testament to humanity's unique and unsettling capacity to challenge the very understanding of existence. The Galactic Federation, once so sure of its methods, was humbled, its foundation shaken, but ultimately strengthened by the realization that true progress lay not in rigid adherence to the known, but in the audacious exploration of the unknown, even if that unknown came wrapped in the chaotic, brilliant package of humanity. In the cycles that followed the mental resonance cascade, the Galactic Federation underwent a profound metamorphosis. The crisis had been a crucible, forging a new understanding of sentience and power. The era of absolute logical optimization began to wane, replaced by a more nuanced appreciation for the complex, often contradictory, nature of life itself. Humanity, once viewed with a mixture of curiosity and condescension, was now regarded with a deep, almost reverent respect. Their messy minds, once a source of concern, became a subject of intense study and admiration. Xylari scholars flocked to Earth, not to teach, but to learn, immersing themselves in human art, philosophy, and even their seemingly nonsensical forms of entertainment, seeking to understand the wellspring of their unique mental resilience. They discovered the human creativity, their capacity for abstract thought, their ability to find patterns in noise and beauty and imperfection, stemmed directly from the very cognitive redundancies they had once sought to eliminate. The Cathar, traditionally rigid in their martial doctrines, began to incorporate adaptive chaos into their training. They studied human history, not for military tactics, but for examples of their unpredictable ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. They observed how human leaders, often driven by emotion as much as logic, could inspire acts of defiance that defied all probabilistic analysis. Nuclear strategic simulations included humanity variables, unpredictable elements that forced their commanders to think outside established frameworks. The Lumina, having experienced the near dissolution of their collective consciousness, now actively sought to integrate individual noise into their vast psychic networks. They learned from humanity the importance of maintaining distinct mental boundaries, even within a collective, allowing for greater resilience and preventing the kind of homogeneous vulnerability that the Veil had exploited. Their collectives became richer, more diverse, capable of greater nuance and adaptability. The Federation Council itself became a more vibrant, less predictable body. Debates, once purely logical exchanges, now sometimes incorporated emotional appeals, intuitive leaps, and even what the Xylari still struggled to categorize as gut feelings. Humanity's ambassador, Xylari Vance, now a revered figure, often found herself mediating between species, struggling to reconcile their ingrained logic with the newly validated illogical truths. Humanity, for its part, remained unapologetically human. They didn't suddenly become perfectly logical or orderly. Their societies continued to be a vibrant mix of innovation and tradition, rationality and emotion, cooperation and occasional, bewildering conflict. But their place in the galaxy was secure, not because of their fleets or their technology, but because of the inherent, unquantifiable power of their minds. The Veil of Whispers, though contained, served as a perpetual reminder. It was a cosmic scar, a monument to the dangers of unchecked optimization and the arrogance of believing one's own logic to be the ultimate truth. It was also a monument to the Terran exception, to the species that dared to be different, to embrace its internal contradictions, and in doing so, save the galaxy. The stars, once charted by rigid algorithms, now held an element of the unpredictable, a Terran spark that promised both wonder and a quiet, unsettling awe. The Galactic Federation, having faced its reckoning, had learned that true strength lay not in perfect order, but in the adaptive, unchained potential of the mind, and in the vast, infinite cosmos, humanity, with its messy, brilliant, and utterly unique consciousness, was finally, truly unleashed. If you enjoyed this glimpse into humanity's unique power, share your thoughts below. What do you think is humanity's greatest strength in the logical galaxy? And what other unchained stories would you like to see?